Welcome back to Realm Talk, Creatures of Faerûn. Today we are quite literally digging deep into the earth to explore one of the most terrifying forces of nature across our lands. The beast, universally known as the Bulette.
Or maybe more vividly, the Landshark.
Exactly, the Landshark. It's a subject that really inspires, well, equal parts dread and fascination, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. Understanding a creature so profoundly destructive is essential for anyone traversing or living in Faerûn. But as you can imagine, getting close enough to study something that detects you by the very ground you stand on.
And then erupts to devour you.
Precisely. Makes rigorous field research. Well, let's just say it's rather challenging.
An understatement.
Huh.
So our mission in this deep dive is to synthesize everything we do know. We've pulled accounts from ancient chronicles, scholarly analyses, and even some, less fortunate adventurer journals.
Trying to piece together a comprehensive picture of this formidable monster.
Yes. We'll look at what it is physically, how it hunts, the scars it leaves on the landscape, and maybe wrestle with the greatest mystery of all, its true origin. Let's uncover the Landshark.
All right. At its heart, the Bulette, formerly tagged by some as Testudo armadillo terribilis. It's renowned across Faerûn. It's not just a predator, it's more like an ecological event.
Universally characterized as one of the most formidable and impactful predators documented.
Definitely.
And that name, Landshark, really says it all, doesn't it? You feel the terror in that word.
You really do. And that terror stems directly from its adaptations. Physically, it's just this massive, heavily armored beast, perfectly designed for subterranean life.
Like a monstrous fusion.
Exactly. The armor of an armadillo, the jaws of a snapping turtle. Its body is dense, streamlined, almost bullet-shaped, allowing it to move through Earth with astonishing speed.
The armor is legendary, almost impenetrable, they say.
It offers remarkable protection. Its hide is covered in layers of thick, overlapping plates, whether they're osteoderms or keratinous plates. The result is an incredibly robust natural defense.
What about color?
They typically range from gray-blue to blue-green, sometimes blue-brown near the head and tail. The carapace itself is exceptionally bony, really resilient against most attacks.
And near Baldur's Gate, diamond scales.
Yes, some accounts mention that. A brief, temporary resilience that seems to flash into existence on their armor. Strange phenomena.
I've heard those plates are more than just protection, they're actually a resource.
Precisely. The large dorsal plates just behind the head, highly prized, particularly by dwarven smiths.
For shields, right.
Exactly. Exceptionally tough shields. Some say these shields are even supernaturally resilient, gaining significant defensive power. Effectively magical, really.
Size seems to be a point of confusion, though. Accounts vary wildly.
They do. Reports of their dimensions, their mass, they differ significantly across regions and historical periods. You see figures from, say, 8 to 11 feet tall at the shoulder, maybe up to 20 feet long, weighing multiple tons.
So why the variation? Subspecies? Age?
Could be any of those. Distinct regional subspecies, different developmental stages. Some older texts imply they grow larger with age, or maybe just the sheer difficulty chroniclers have in accurately measuring such a dangerous and mobile creature.
Makes sense. And its defensive capabilities. What makes it so lethal up close, besides just being huge?
Beyond sheer mass, its primary weapon is that truly massive mouth. It's filled with jagged, dull, ivory teeth, built for inflicting devastating piercing damage.
Yes.
And it also possesses 4 powerful limbs, each ending in 3-toed, scooped claws. These aren't just for digging, they're formidable in combat.
Even the back legs.
Older accounts note the rear limbs can deliver surprisingly powerful strikes when it's cornered. Uses everything it has.
So much armor and weaponry. Are there any weaknesses? Anything at all?
Surprisingly, yes. Though they are difficult to exploit. Older accounts identify a surprisingly soft area beneath that big dorsal crest.
But there's a catch, I assume.
Of course. This vulnerable spot is typically only exposed when the Bulette raises its crest, usually as part of an aggressive display. So its show of strength paradoxically reveals a weakness.
A high-risk bluff, then.
Exactly. There's also apparently a small, less protected area around its eyes, maybe 8 inches across. But getting close enough to target that?
Not advisable. What about sensing the world? How does something that lives mostly underground find its prey?
This is where its most critical adaptation comes into play. Tremor sense.
Tremor
It
sense.
automatically detects the location of anything touching the ground within a considerable range, typically 60 feet. It's not just detecting that something is there, it's effectively seeing the world through vibrations.
Like the ground is a map it can read instantly.
Pretty much, yes. That's its
Right.
primary method for locating prey while burrowing.
Does it have normal vision too?
It does. Dark vision, often cited as 60 feet, though some sources, particularly near Baldur's Gate, place it slightly less, maybe around 40 feet. Its eyes are described as yellowish with blue-green pupils.
Any other senses? Hearing? Smell?
Well, accounts often mention high perception and listen capabilities, suggesting good hearing. And while there's no explicit detail on its nose, its clear dietary preferences and aversions strongly imply a functional sense of smell. It's drawn to certain things, like mating pits, avoids others.
A finely tuned hunter, then, despite its reputation for, well, not being the sharpest tool in the shed.
Exactly. Let's talk about the internal mechanics. What powers this subterranean engine?
Yeah, the strength must be immense.
Its frame is built on what one source calls reams of pure muscle. This explains the immense power it can exert both for burrowing and combat. It's just raw physical force.
But its digestive system is infamous, isn't it?
Oh, it's truly extraordinary. Its stomach acids are astonishingly potent. They don't just rapidly break down flesh and bone.
They dissolve gear, too.
Everything. Ingested clothing, armor, weaponry, and most remarkably, items imbued with magic.
Wait, it can digest magic? Like the enchantment itself?
It appears so. The implication is profound. If a valuable magic item, or say the enchanted armor of a warrior, is consumed and given time to be processed,
It's gone. Forever.
recovery is highly improbable, yes.
Hmm.
This unique biochemistry, capable of dissolving enchantments and dense materials, what can be fascinating and incredibly dangerous to alchemists or mages studying corrosives.
That's unlike anything else I've ever heard of. Truly terrifying. And it's breathing. How does it stay underground so long?
Despite being air-breathing, terrestrial, it possesses incredible lung capacity. This lets it remain buried for extended periods, sometimes maybe only surfacing once a day for a single deep breath.
How does it manage that?
Through a specialized nostril hidden high up on its back behind the dorsal plates, it acts like a natural snorkel.
A snorkel. That really supports the idea of it, well, swimming through the earth.
It does.
Is it warm-blooded like a mammal? Or cold-blooded like a reptile with all that armor?
Posthumous dissections seem to point towards it being endothermic or warm-blooded. Similar to an armadillo, actually.
That makes sense. Fueling the high metabolic rate needed for all that burrowing and hunting.
Exactly. It needs that internal furnace.
And the burrowing itself,
Mhm.
is it just raw strength with those massive claws? Or is there something stranger going on?
That's a significant point of debate among scholars. Powerful claws are certainly involved. Its speed underground often matches its speed over land, raw excavation.
But there's another theory, right? Something more alchemical.
Yes, a prominent theory suggests a more arcane mechanism. A gland, perhaps in its throat, that secretes a fluid which rapidly transmutes solid earth into a temporary semi-liquid state.
It literally liquefies the ground to swim through it.
That's the idea. Field observations sometimes reveal muddy, unstable tunnels, which lend some support to this. There are even these unsettling anecdotal claims that soil it recently passed through temporarily gains slight rock-dissolving properties, a fleeting, dangerous trace.
Unbelievable.
Of course, there's also the simpler explanation stemming from its classification. As a magical beast or monstrosity, its burrowing power might just be inherently augmented by arcane means. Regardless of physical or alchemical processes, it could even be a combination.
So the very way it moves is shrouded in mystery and potentially magic. What about its personality, if you can call it that?
Personality might be generous, yes.
Yeah.
Universally described as foul and exceedingly aggressive. The common descriptors are pretty blunt.
Yeah.
Stupid, mean, and fearless.
Fearless is a big one.
Absolutely. It attacks without complex thought, seemingly devoid of fear, often engaging foes far larger or more numerous than itself.
How low is its intelligence, really? Were we talking animal cunning or less?
Consistently reported as very low, often rated with an intelligence barely above an ooze. Truly basic.
So its actions are driven almost entirely by primal instinct?
Pretty much. Find food, find a mate, defend its territory. You hear that phrase a lot in accounts, get out of my house. It operates on a very, very basic level, just pure instinct.
Which aligns with its typical designation as neutral or unaligned, I suppose.
Exactly. It's a predator acting on instinct. not driven by malice or any concept of good or evil. It just is.
And that instinct is mostly about eating.
Huh.
So what does this incredibly stupid, fearless, instinct-driven beast like to eat?
Well, it's an obligate carnivore with a notorious, seemingly insatiable appetite. It will attack virtually anything it perceives as edible. Just
Anything, no preferences at all. Even something that basic must have favorites.
Yeah, there are marked preferences, yes. It has a known taste for halflings and horses.
Halflings. Specifically, why?
It's a noted preference, yes, specifically halfling flesh. Some scholars, with a touch of meta-humor, link this particular preference to the creature's earliest chroniclers, perhaps reflecting the prevalence of halfling adventurers at the time. More seriously, though.
There are things it won't eat.
Absolutely. It utterly refuses to consume elves, living or dead, and it exhibits a strong dislike for the taste of dwarves.
Dislikes dwarves, but still kills them.
Oh, yes. If they pose a threat or are simply in its way, it'll kill them. Just apparently doesn't like the taste.
Refuses elves, dislikes dwarves, but otherwise eats anything. That's peculiar for something so unintelligent. It almost hints at some deep, ancient, instinctual prejudice, or maybe a physiological incompatibility.
It's one of the many small contradictions that make the creature so enigmatic, isn't it? And regional diets vary too. Cormanthor bulettes, for instance, are noted for preying heavily on deer and wild boar.
I heard some very old accounts claim they'd leave kills to rot. Does that fit?
That clashes with most descriptions of immediate consumption, yeah. Maybe it was a regional quirk back then, or perhaps just misinterpreted behavior. Caching, maybe. Hard to say for sure.
So how does this walking armored digestive tract actually catch its preferred meal? Assuming it's not an elf or a dwarf.
Ambush is its primary method. Relies utterly on that tremor sense to pinpoint prey moving above ground. Then it erupts violently from the earth.
Often crests first, right? That fin breaking the surface.
Exactly. That dorsal fin is the iconic warning sign. Terrifying.
I heard they can jump too. Seems unlikely for something so massive.
Surprisingly agile. They're capable of astonishing leaps, a standing leap of up to 30 feet horizontally, 15 feet vertically. And they combine this with a devastating, deadly leap maneuver. They launch themselves, landing with immense force to damage and knock targets prone. Area attack, basically.
They launch themselves at you from underground. That's
Yep.
horrifying.
A terrifying tactic indeed. When attacking, they tend to target the easiest, closest prey first. Less armored individuals, smaller creatures.
Squishy spell slingers.
Squishy spell slingers and small folk with low to no armor are particularly vulnerable, yes. And their dark vision, combined with that preference for prey that lacks it, like halflings, suggests they may favor hunting under the cover of darkness.
Smart in its own brutal way. Any other tactics?
They might employ hit and run, snatching a meal and immediately burrowing away. Sometimes they seem to regain vitality while burrowing too. And near Baldur's Gate, accounts even mention a ranged attack. Corrosive phlegm.
Corrosive phlegm. Delightful.
Yeah.
A projectile of digestive acid.
Seems so. Potent stuff. And the Cormanthor ones. You mentioned something about swallowing live prey feet first.
That's according to some chroniclers, yes. They might even nap while the victim is still exposed. Gods. It paints a particularly gruesome picture of their habits in that region.
It does.
It's clear they have a devastating personal impact. But what about their wider role, their ecology?
Well, they're predominantly solitary. Very rarely will you encounter more than one, save for brief, often violent mating periods. They are intensely territorial.
Driving out other big monsters.
Aggressively, yes. Driving out or killing other large creatures in their domain. Ogres, trolls, even giants are said to abandon territory claimed by a Bulette. This territoriality can, ironically, sometimes be exploited, lure it towards another threat.
Risky strategy. How much territory do they need?
Their appetite necessitates a vast territory. Estimates go up to 30 square miles per individual. And they don't maintain fixed lairs. They're nomadic within their range, just burrowing down to rest wherever they happen to be. Nest sites seem temporary only for reproduction, and even those descriptions vary wildly.
What kind of environments do they favor? Where are they most common?
Commonly temperate hills, grasslands, mountains. They particularly prefer softer ground like deserts or swamps, makes the burrowing easier, naturally. They're also known in the Underdark. Basically, they're adaptable, provided there's sufficient prey.
Any specific known locales?
Cormanthor is famous for its unique variants. The Underdark near Baldur's Gate has its share, and the northern wastes of Renai are home to the Icespine variant. They pop up in many places.
And their ecological impact? You said it was profound.
Deeply destructive. One account I read grimly stated, literally nothing that moves is safe from it. They destroy flora, uprooting large trees, have even been observed deliberately knocking down griffin nesting trees.
Why griffin trees?
Perhaps to eliminate aerial competition, or just pure destructive instinct. Hard to say. Geomorphologically, their extensive burrowing triggers landslides in hilly terrain.
Creating unstable ground.
Exactly. And vast, sometimes muddy tunnel networks, especially if that secretion theory holds true, they literally reshape the land, making areas unsuitable for building.
And the local wildlife.
Their voracious appetite decimates local fauna. They strip an area bare, forcing the Bulette itself to move on. And as mentioned, they displace other large predators and humanoids.
What about settlements? Villages?
Oh, the impact on communities can be catastrophic. A single bullet can render a peaceful farming community a desolate wasteland in weeks as inhabitants flee for their lives. There's the grim legend of Brantenburg.
The one that terrorized the village for years.
12 years until it was completely abandoned. Just one bullet. Stories of bullet storms and vanished mercenary companies speak to their sheer destructive potential.
Are there any benefits to their presence? Any useful resources to be gained, despite the danger?
Very limited and extremely dangerous to acquire. The most well-known is those prized plates for crafting exceptionally strong shields, especially favored by dwarven smiths.
Anything else?
Well, there are those fleeting anecdotal claims of temporary rock-dissolving properties in soil where one has recently burrowed, potentially useful if you could harness it safely.
Which seems unlikely.
Very. And specifically in Cormanthor, the powdered bone from their nesting pits, apparently saturated with their egg fluid, is said to be an exceptionally potent magical fertilizer.
Magical fertilizer from a bullet nest.
According to the tales, these things create high-risk, high-reward niches for the truly desperate or daring.
So interaction is mostly defined by avoidance, flight, or lethal combat.
Almost entirely antagonistic, yes. They prey on humanoids with that preference for halflings, terrorize settlements, refuse elves, dislike but kill dwarves. Most rational beings flee on sight.
Are they ever hunted successfully?
They are hunted, yes, for their plates, or sometimes out of desperate bravery, like the legendary chase after Gemhide. Mercenary companies are often hired to deal with problem individuals, taming attempts. Notoriously perilous. The cautionary tale of Lenore is a grim reminder of that folly.
And the Bulette folk, that ancient dwarven connection.
That lore suggests a much more complex, possibly desperate, ancient interaction. Dwarves magically fused with Bulettes. It deviates wildly from the simple prey-predator dynamic. It implies Bulettes, or their essence, were known and used in ancient, powerful magic.
What about other monsters?
Fierce territorial rivals, minotaurs, hook horrors, potentially even beholders or remerhas in the case of the Icespine variant. They compete directly with griffins, too. Anything large is a potential threat or rival.
Even in death, they can remain a threat, you mentioned. Undead Bulettes.
Yes. Bulette corpses can be reanimated. We've seen it with Myconid sovereigns like Glut in the Underdark. Undead Bulettes exist as terrifying constructs, retaining their physical form and actions, but fundamentally altered. Enhanced resilience, typically, but often vulnerable to divine magic. Resistance to decay, immunity to poisons. Their behavior changes slightly to less relentless hunger, more reactive aggression, or guarding territory.
Truly a creature of immense power and destruction. Which brings us, I think, to the central puzzle, the deep enigma. Where did the Bulette come from?
Ah, yes. This is one of Faerûn's great unsolved mysteries. The creature's unique blend of contradictory traits. It's baffling.
Reptilian armor, mammalian warmth, burrowing mastery, bizarre diet, brutal reproduction.
It just doesn't fit neatly into any known natural lineage. It feels unnatural, which points towards magic, elemental forces, or something truly alien.
So what are the leading theories among scholars? What's the best guess?
Well, the most widely circulated theory points to magical artifice or creation. The Mad Mage Chimera theory is a prime example.
The idea that some wizard just made them.
Essentially, yes. Proposing they were deliberately engineered by a powerful, possibly deranged mage, perhaps combining armadillo and snapping turtle traits, as the morphology suggests. The historical scarcity of observed young initially lent credence to this, implying a non-standard artificial origin.
And their classification supports this too.
Being classed as a monstrosity or magical beast definitely leans towards a non-natural genesis, yes.
What about the Bulette folklore? Does that fit in here?
It adds a fascinating layer of complexity. The very existence of ancient dwarven wizards who could magically fuse dwarves with bullets. It suggests that bullets, or at least a magical template for them, were known and potent enough to be used in such powerful bioengineering.
So the Bulettes might be even older than the folk, or they arose together.
It raises those questions, yes. Were the bullets already there? Or did both arise from the same underlying arcane principle or discovery? It's tantalizing.
You mentioned some stranger threads in the scholarship about toys.
Ah, yes. Within this debate, there are some truly peculiar threads trying to explain the creature's sheer strangeness and its seemingly abrupt appearance in early records. Certain academics point to bizarre, perhaps garbled accounts, suggesting the creature's initial conception or description might be linked to highly unusual sources,
Like what?
like references to pragmatic adaptations of common objects, maybe a cheap plastic toy used by arch scholars to demonstrate a form, or accounts tracing this hypothetical toy's design to creatures depicted in distant, perhaps extraplanar chronicles. Things like Ultraman are sometimes mentioned in these fringe theories.
So the theory is that they were somehow inspired by extraplanar toys or drawings. That seems far-fetched.
It's certainly not mainstream, and heavily debated whether it speaks to the creature's literal creation or merely how its bizarre form was first understood or chronicled by our ancestors. Some frame it as just a historical note on peculiar academic tangents, perhaps influenced by satire or odd cross-planar echoes preserved within certain scholarly traditions.
Just shows how desperate scholars are to explain it.
It highlights how genuinely difficult it is to explain the Bulette through conventional means, yes. It's like that persistent, idiosyncratic boule pronunciation insisted upon by some academics.
The pronunciation.
Yes. It's a strange cultural signature, perhaps echoing from its supposed original source or creator, that doesn't really fit known linguistic patterns of Faerûn. Another small piece of the enigma.
Fascinatingly weird. But what are the counter-arguments to this whole magical creation theory? If a wizard made them, why? And how did they become self-sustaining?
Exactly. If created, who was the creator and what was their purpose? More fundamentally, how did they become a self-sustaining species capable of such diverse and often contradictory reproduction, especially given their apparently mindless neutral alignment? It doesn't quite track.
Okay, so what's the next major theory? Elementals.
Elemental provenance, yes. This theory posits they are somehow descended from or linked to native elemental stock from the elemental plane of Earth.
That would explain the burrowing.
It would elegantly explain their unparalleled ability to dig through Earth, the possible Earth-transmuting fluid, and their tremor sense. Their simple, powerful form could even reflect a primal elemental nature. Solid theory in some ways.
But elementals aren't flesh and blood or warm-blooded or breathing air like Bulettes do.
Precisely. That's the primary counterargument. How did they acquire these biological traits so different from typical Earth elementals, and how did they become established here on the prime material plane? Big questions.
So the last option is they just evolved naturally.
That's the third view, yes, natural evolution. A minority view arguing they are simply animals that evolved under intense environmental pressures. Some adaptations, like the cold-adapted ice spine variant and their largely animalistic behavior, offer some support.
But that seems to gloss over the lack of any fossil record or clear lineage. And traits like digesting magic items seem, well, unnatural.
Those are the major hurdles for the natural evolution theory, absolutely. The absence of a clear evolutionary path, plus extreme specialized traits like digesting magical energies or that incredibly varied and hyper-cannibalistic reproduction. It seems to push beyond the plausible limits of purely natural selection, suggests magic had a hand in it somehow, even if it wasn't direct creation.
So we're left with magic, elementals, or a very strained idea of evolution. Or maybe some complex mix of all three lost to time.
The ongoing scholarly debate really underscores just how deep the enigma is. The Bulette refuses to fit neatly into our understanding of the known world.
Speaking of defying neat categorization, let's delve into their reproduction. This seems to be another area of significant and often brutal conflict in the accounts.
It is indeed. The sheer variety in description strongly suggests either multiple distinct species or subspecies we haven't fully categorized, or perhaps a profoundly fragmented understanding of a single species across different environments. But the one constant theme, brutality.
The common mating account is horrific.
Generally depicted as violent and destructive, yes. The typical narrative describes an almost apocalyptic ritual where the male must prove his worth through combat. If mating occurs,
the female eats him.
The female's feeding instincts often take over, yes. She invariably consumes the wounded and exhausted male, extreme sexual cannibalism, Provides nutrients for the eggs, perhaps.
Gods preserve us. But you mentioned the Cormanthor ones have a completely different method, less lethal for the male.
A stark contrast, chronicled by Elminster, no less. In Cormanthor, the male apparently prepares a territory with offerings of corpses, deer, boar, other predators. He digs a pit, lines it with finely chewed bone powder, and then tunnels underneath.
And waits.
Waits for the female, drawn by the scent, to arrive and settle in the pit. Then the male bursts from the tunnel to mate. Critically, in this version, the male then simply wanders away. He is not consumed.
That's a radical divergence. Same species, totally different ritual. Fascinating. And what about birth? Exor, live young. The accounts conflict there too.
Massively. There is no scholarly consensus. We have evidence pointing both ways. A single dissection account supports viviparity live birth, citing features consistent with warm-blooded live-bearing creatures.
But most accounts say eggs.
The majority support oviparity, yes, egg-laying. Though even here, the descriptions vary wildly. It's almost like different chroniclers saw entirely different creatures.
How varied can laying eggs be?
Significantly. Cormanthor accounts describe laying maybe up to a dozen rock-hard, spine-covered eggs with a gestation period of only hours.
Hours. For a creature that size.
Incredible, isn't it? Then you have Durakai's records detailing 60 to 80 eggs laid in extensive sealed subterranean nests carved by both parents, implying a rare instance of pre-hatching parental investment before the carnage begins. And another source, DM Dave, mentions groups of just 4 identical eggs buried in loose soil.
Hours for gestation. 60 eggs. 4 eggs. Parental care versus none. It's all over the place. And then the brutality begins.
Immediately upon hatching. Early life is a savage crucible defined by intense sibling and filial cannibalism. It's brutal natural selection cranked up to 11. Only the most aggressive survive.
And in those cannibalistic mating accounts, the male's body fuels the female.
Provides a vital nutritional boost for the female to fuel that rapid egg production or sustain her through gestation, yes.
So what happens when they hatch? In Cormanthor, for instance.
The Cormanthor account is particularly grim. The hatchlings immediately attack the mother. She instinctively tries to eat them back. A battle ensues, often ending with the young consuming the mother.
The young eat the mother.
More often than not, apparently, though occasionally she eats them all. Survivors then devour the dead siblings and any remains of the mother. Rarely do more than 2 or 3 survive this initial slaughter.
That's profoundly disturbing. Nature, red in tooth and claw, doesn't even begin to cover it.
The Durakai's account is also intense, though slightly different. The first hatchlings consume unhatched eggs and any dead creatures left in the nest. They form proto-Bulette swarms that then cannibalize about half the remaining population, which seems to accelerate their development.
They grow faster by eating each other.
Apparently so. They secrete their tunneling liquid early and escape the nest after about a week. The father departs, and the mother expels the survivors, sometimes eating any that linger too close to the nest. DM Dave's account is simpler. The strongest pups just consume their weaker siblings in the nest until only a couple remain.
So, a truly horrific start to life, whichever version you believe. How fast do they grow after that initial phase? And how long do they live? More conflicting accounts, I suppose.
Naturally. Growth rates vary wildly by report. The Durakai's account is extreme, suggesting juveniles spend 5 or 6 months deep underground, consuming metal veins and other proto-Bulettes, returning fully grown at just 7 months old.
7 months from hatchling to adult.
Seems impossibly fast, but that's the claim. Other speculation suggests more traditional stages over a few years: hatchling, young, adolescent, adult, maybe a toughened stage after decades.
And lifespan, that's all over the map, too.
One of the most contentious points. The original AD&D Monster Manual noted the absence of young or old carcasses found, hinting at potentially very long lives, with creatures perhaps growing larger indefinitely with age. The Brandenburg Bulette terrorized that village for 12 years, remember?
But the Durakai's accounts.
They posit a relatively short life cycle, typically just 2 to 4 years, maxing out at 5 in their observed populations, possibly related to breeding programs.
And then there's the Gold Bulette, immortal.
That variant is described as having a virtually immortal lifespan, yes. So we have reports ranging from a mere handful of years to potentially forever, depending on the source or the specific variant being described.
This rapid, varied gestation and maturation alongside such disparate lifespan claims. It just screams unnatural.
It really does. It's another piece of the puzzle suggesting either incredible biodiversity within the Bulette label or an unnatural acceleration, perhaps tied to magic or that high metabolism we talked about. There's also speculation they might spend a period each year, maybe 4 months, inactive, deep underground, possibly hibernating or for reproductive cycles we don't fully understand.
So the common landshark, the Testudo armadillo terribilis, is really just one piece of a much larger, stranger puzzle. Are there other documented subspecies or strange aberrant forms we should know about?
Oh, yes. Several documented variants differ significantly from the common form, suggest true subspeciation or perhaps magical alteration over time, beyond the common and the unique Cormanthor forms we've
Or is
discussed.
the ice spine bulette, right, adapted to the cold?
Exactly. Found in the northern wastes, like Renai. They are often bluish, with ice actually covering their armor, which seems to augment their protection. But the most radical departure is behavioral. They form hunting clans, groups of up to 6 individuals hunting together. Young apparently hunt with the parents, are accepted into the group, and they're described as less vicious when sated. Still territorial towards other clans, but this cooperative hunting is unique among Bulettes.
Social bulettes, that's a huge shift.
It really is. Suggests either intense environmental pressure driving social evolution, or perhaps that they're a distinct, more complex species altogether. They're known rivals with Remar has in their icy territory.
What else? You mentioned the goldborn.
Yes, the Goldburn, noted for being considerably smaller than standard bullets and having armor that observers describe as doesn't quite fit. Interestingly, the dwarven term Goldburon for bullet might be related.
And there were hints of intelligence.
Some older lore does hint at the existence of small, intelligent bullets, which could align with this variant. Perhaps it's a neotenic form retaining juvenile traits, or a failed lineage, maybe selectively bred somehow. The ill-fitting armor might suggest stunted or arrested development.
Small and intelligent. That's a truly unsettling thought for a creature typically defined by mindless brutality.
It is indeed. And then, of course, there is the most enigmatic variant, the gold bullet,
The immortal ones.
described as virtually immortal due to an immense lifespan. Because of this age and experience, they supposedly possess ancient, invaluable subterranean knowledge accumulated over millennia. However, they are characterized by unyielding secrecy, never revealing their origins or plans.
So they are intelligent. Highly intelligent.
It certainly implies intelligence, perhaps wisdom, and ancient power, profoundly challenging the standard low intellect profile of the common bullet. It's possible a gold bullet holds the key to the species' true origins, if its trust could ever be gained, which seems unlikely.
We also talked about the necrological variants. Undead bullets.
A known phenomenon, yes, like those found in Undermountain. They retain the form and actions of a living bullet, but our fundamentally altered creature type becomes undead. Increased durability, often vulnerability to radiant energy, resistance to necrotic, immunity to poison, and the poisoned condition. Their behavior might be slightly different too, maybe less proactively aggressive, more reactive, or territorial.
And powerful beings can create that.
As we saw with the Myconid sovereign glut reanimating a corpse, yes, another form of this transformation.
What about legendary individuals, like Gemhide? Is that a subspecies?
Gemhide is generally considered less a distinct subspecies and more a unique legendary individual. An albino landshark, her hide is famously said to be studded with gems, supposedly a result of centuries spent consuming mineral-rich veins deep underground.
Tougher than normal.
Oh yes, described as larger and significantly more cunning than common bullets, possessing unique adaptations like drill claws that allow her to burrow through solid rock, bypassing tunnels and traps. She has legendary resistance and actions, in some tales a true apex predator of her kind. Her story is famously intertwined with her relentless hunter, Ismail Ban, who hunts her out of pure vengeful obsession after she crippled him and wiped out his party.
A personal vendetta against a bullet.
Wow.
And that truly bizarre glittering bullet, the one mixed with the Exhorn.
Another aberrant, unique occurrence rather than a subspecies, yes. Apparently the result of a conjurer accidentally summoning a Zorn inside a living bullet during some chaotic battle, a freak magical accident.
Creating a fused creature.
Exactly. A hybrid entity with a strange appearance and an acquired taste for metal and jewels, which become embedded in its hide, hence the glittering name. Reports suggest it might have slightly lower armor but higher vitality and unique abilities tied to its dual nature, like dragging targets underground or even explosive carapace attacks. It's a stark example of how uncontrolled magic can create unpredictable and terrifying variants out of already dangerous creatures.
So the bullet isn't a single, simple monster at all. It's really a whole spectrum of terror. From the common landshark to those clan-forming ice bimes, potentially intelligent Golborons, the ancient immortal Bulettes, and then these bizarre, unique, magical accidents or legendary individuals like Gemhide.
Exactly. It is a creature, or perhaps a family of creatures, defined by immense strength, terrifying specialization, and a devastating ecological impact. It's a testament to the wild, untamable peril inherent in Faerûn.
Strong, heavily armored, insatiably hungry, a master of subterranean movement.
And it leaves scars, deep scars on the land and on the lives it touches.
And despite everything we've synthesized and explored today, pulling from all these disparate sources, so much remains shrouded in mystery, doesn't it?
Profound mysteries persist. Its definitive origin, is it truly magical creation, something elemental warped over time, or some strange accelerated evolution? The absolute truth behind its wildly varied and often contradictory reproductive methods, especially that extreme cannibalism, it's baffling.
And the potential for higher intelligence hinted at in variants like the gold bulette or the goldburn.
That's a huge question. Then there's the exact mechanism of its astonishing burrowing speed, physical, alchemical, magical, the massive discrepancies in documented lifespan, and just the full scope of its biodiversity across Faerûn. These are all significant unanswered questions. We've barely scratched the surface in a way.
Which means, despite the extreme peril involved, cautious study is still essential if we ever hope to truly understand them.
Absolutely. To truly comprehend its place in the natural and perhaps unnatural world of Faerûn, continued investigation is vital. Every new encounter, every recovered fragment of lore, every survivor's tale adds another piece, however small, to the puzzle.
It really is a potent symbol, isn't it? Of the wild, untamable danger that lies just beneath the surface of our world, often literally.
A constant visceral reminder that the ground you walk upon is not always solid, not always safe. You never quite know what's moving beneath your feet.
It makes you wonder, doesn't it? The next time the ground trembles. Is it just the earth settling? Or is it one of those simple, hungry brutes driven purely by instinct? Maybe one of those clan-forming ice spines hunting with that eerie cooperation? Or perhaps, just perhaps, an ancient gold bulette older than many civilizations, contemplating its ancient hidden plans from deep below. What secrets might they hold about why these terrors exist at all?
That thought, that's perhaps the most chilling one of all. What if the most dangerous ones aren't just hungry, but are actually thinking?